What we are going to use are pseudo elements. So if we go down here below the pseudo classes, there's some pseudo elements and a new property called the content property to be able to add the quotes. So here are the pseudo elements, after, before. Now notice these ones have 2 colons. The pseudo classes have a single colon, and down here these have double colons, and they allow us to select just the first letter of an element or the first line of an element or what the user's selecting, or they allow us to select something before an element or after an element. And we're going to use the before and after pseudo elements. And once we select those, get those selectors written, we're going to use the content property to add content before or after. And that's what the content property allows us to do, is to add content. And if we go down here, there's lots of different kinds of content that we can add. And 2 of those things are an open quote and a close quote. And when we use these as the content, this will display those quotes that we defined. Other things you can do is add an image or a sound or a video by using a URL. You can add a string before. You can add content that's just a string that's something you want, or the value of an attribute. So lots of different things you can add with the content property. But we want to do this using the before and after pseudo elements. So in the style sheet, we want to add a new style block, and we want this to be in the aside, and we're going to do it specifically on block quotes that are a descendant of the aside. And now we're going to, on this block quote, we're going to say we're before. So this is using that pseudo element before, and now we'll use the content, and the value for the content is open quote. Okay, let's save that and go back and refresh and see what we get. And there, it inserted an open quote before each of those. And if we make this bigger, we see that it was the curly quote that we expected, because that's what we had defined. So before each block quote, so there we were able to add that opening quote using CSS style, and it added it to every single block quote. Now we can style this block quote more. Here we defined what character would be used, but now we can style it by adding some styles. So we can say for the font family, we want to use, and here we can pick, this allows us to pick the exact curly quote that we want to use. So we want to use Times New Roman, and there's our option right there, Times New Roman, Times, or serif. So this is our font stack. And then we want to make the size, so we'll use font size, and we'll make it 1.6 EM. Okay, and font weight, we'll make it bold. All right, so there we added style to that opening quote. So if we go back and refresh, then we see the style that has been added to that opening quote. Now notice there's no ending quotes because we just said do it before each block quote. So let's go ahead and add after. So we're going to use the aside and then the block quote that is a descendant of aside. And this time we'll use after as the pseudo element. And for the content, we're going to be adding the closing quote. So a close quote. And then we're going to use exactly the same style for the close quote. So I'll just copy paste all of that style. And we save that and go back and refresh. And there we have added a closing quote after. So we added content before and content after. We added it one time in the CSS, and it shows up on every block quote.